Coming up on Chopper's Political Podcast.
You've rebelled a bit too, haven't you?
Well, look,
naughty MP.
Well, I think it's important
There'll be a
that
double
we...
touch off the podcast. Welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast, where I bring you the best guest gossip, news and stories from our studios at GB News in our bunker in the heart of Westminster. Now, speculation is growing that the Chancellor Rachel Reeves will have to raise taxes this autumn in the budget after dropping the £5 billion worth of savings from her welfare reform bill. This is what she said after the autumn budget.
But we're not going to need to come back in another budget and do anything like this again. We have now taken the action to get our public finances on a stable path. And Chris, we've set the spending envelope for the rest of this Parliament, so we don't need to come back for more.
That's what Rachel Reeves told me for GB News after the budget. But with very little room of where to gain more money, will she look at inducing a wealth tax? Or will she be asking employers for more pension contributions, or even freezing maybe income tax thresholds? Joining me now is someone who knows this challenge of trying to balance the books, the former Chancellor of the Exchequer, Jeremy Hunt. Jeremy, welcome to Chopper's Political Podcast.
It's a pleasure to be here.
Great to have you here. I should say, are you good? I should say Sir Jeremy, because that's your new title. Is that strange?
It is a bit strange, so let's just stick with Jeremy.
Jeremy.
I'm used to it yet.
You made your wife a lady finally, which is
Finally.
That's why you accept it, of course.
I think she deserves it more than me.
I always think it's just that wives. It's not about the partner. It's not about you at all. Your last words in Chancellor last May were to me, weren't they?
Yes,
you walked
I walked out of Downing Street with all the world's media there, with my whole family. I wanted it to be a dignified exit for the Hunt family. Yes. And who did we see out of the corner of a
squatting down like a
chopper? Yeah. And, I had to say to my son who was walking next to me, look, that guy, Chris Hope, he's not as bad as they say. Don't believe everything you hear about him.
I got it. That is Mr. Hope, a nice guy. Don't believe what they say about him, which I thought was brilliant. I had to retweet it, of course, as you do nowadays. You've got a new book called Can We Be Great Again? I'll ask you about that in a bit. But first, let's just do a bit of news and politics where we stand now. Speculation ahead of the budget. Yes or no? Taking your Conservative hat away, will Rachel Reeves put up taxes this autumn?
I fear she will, yes. I think it's going to be a disastrous thing for the economy if she does, because, what many of us are worried about is that we're going to end up in this doom loop of ever higher taxes and ever lower growth. And, there are lots of divides in British politics, but the Conservative Party, I think, is the only party that really believes that you have to have lower taxes if you want higher growth. Look around the world, America, Asia, all the countries where the economy is going gangbusters are places which have kept their taxes low. Only in Europe, including the UK, sadly, have we gone in the opposite direction. Now, I know I had to put up taxes after the pandemic. We borrowed 400 billion quid, and that had to be paid for. But I was seeking to get us on a path back to lower tax, and I'm worried that we're now going to go in the opposite direction.
You said on the point, though, a bit more honesty about why you need to raise taxes. 400 billion was the COVID cost. 100 billion, I think, was the energy shock cost from the Ukraine war. £500 billion. That's going to be paid back somehow, isn't it? And both sides will have to raise taxes.
Yes, I mean, I think my biggest failure as Chancellor was not to get across the message that we really did want to reduce tax. And, we had to put them up to pay for not just the COVID costs, but also we had the energy shock, all that help with people's fuel bills. But we wanted to, as soon as we could, to get back on a path of bringing them down. And I'm not sure, in honesty, that people actually believe that. I think they thought, Labour, Tories, they will put up your taxes. Yeah. And that may have contributed to the result that we ended up getting.
And not your thought necessarily, but we just saw the record of previous chancellors. I think,
look, if I was going to say, one of the things I'm pleased about, 2.5% of GDP on defence, major thing that we had to do. Getting inflation down from 11% to 2%, incredibly important. But winning the argument...
really hard inflation, by the way. That was a real achievement by the
government. It was a big deal to do that, and very painful because we had all those public sector strikes. We had to keep a lid on public sector pay, which again is something the government is not doing. I think my other area that I wish we'd gone further with benefit of hindsight's a wonderful thing, of course, is welfare reform. I think with Mel Stride, I made a good start. But, this is the big question of our age in the end. Can we afford as a country to be signing off 3,000 people every single day as not being able to look for work? I mean, we are going to go bankrupt at the speed of light if we carry on like that, and it has to be addressed. And as far as I can tell, in British politics, you have Reform, which wants to expand the welfare state, getting rid of the two-child count. You've got Labour that has shown itself totally incapable of tackling welfare reform. The Lib Dems even more left-wing than Labour. This is why we need the Conservative Party to get back on its feet, frankly, because we are the only party in British politics that says you've got to get the numbers to add up. We've got to live within our means.
That's what we heard Kemi Badenoch say last week in that speech. I think that was the first time I've seen her recognise some political ground opening up for her on welfare reform. I've always thought that really only Labour can reform NHS and welfare. And it's really depressing. They can't even cut $5 billion off that budget, given it might be $100 billion by the end of the decade.
It is depressing because love Labour or loathe Labour, they are going to be in office for another 3 to 4 years. And the alternative to serious welfare reform is going to be tax rises, which will kill off growth. But the opportunity there is really enormous. So if we got the welfare bill just to the level it was before the pandemic, 5 years ago, £49 billion a year. I mean, that's enough for 3% of GDP on defence.
That's two of your black holes, Jeremy Hunt. But I'll hold.
Yes. I could talk about that for a whole podcast.
Let's go there. Wealth taxes.
I mean, look,
they're rearing their heads.
Just look at what's happened with the non-doms taxes.
Yeah.
Now, this is a really...
You started.
I did. But I took very good advice from top city lawyers. I said, I don't want millionaires leaving the country. We need their money. We need their investment. They said, you can change and get rid of the non-dom status. They won't mind paying a bit more tax, but don't touch inheritance tax. If you tell a foreigner that they're going to have to pay inheritance tax of 40% on their worldwide assets, they're going to leave. And so I didn't touch it. Unfortunately, Rachel Reeves did. There have been some reports that she's going to change her mind on that. I really hope she does, because inheritance tax is a type of wealth tax. And if anyone is toying with the idea that a wealth tax could be a convenient answer, just look at the impact of this very small measure on non-doms and the number of people it has driven abroad. And just look at what happened when France introduced a wealth tax, and numerous other countries, they've all tried it. And they all realise it doesn't work.
Because most billionaires or millionaires are contemplating when they die, because they're that age. They're over 50 in most cases, aren't they?
That is true.
They're off, and they want to make sure they're going to have to protect their assets for children.
Absolutely.
Rachel Reeves promised not to increase taxes on working people, VAT, national insurance, income tax. When you saw that ahead of the election, do you think she was just boxing herself in too much? We saw how she did increase it on employers' share of NICs.
I think she was boxing herself in as a Labour Chancellor that basically wanted to raise tax without people getting scared off. And as a Conservative, I would say, look, you need spending restraint and you need to get taxes down. And so, we would not have put up those 3 taxes either. And we would have said, no, we're going to have more efficient public services. We're going to have welfare reform. That's how we're going to square the circle. By the way, that was the reason for this 22 billion fiction that was not backed up by the OBR. They refused to use the word black hole.
10 billion they found, I think?
They found 9 billion of unfunded spending commitments, but they said it's impossible to say whether the government wouldn't be able to resolve that through efficiencies. And given that the government spends £1 trillion every year, I mean, that's what we would have done. We'd have found efficiencies as we've done ahead of every budget.
Yes.
But the reason for that big argument, which we hear Keir Starmer constantly refraining, is because she knew she was going to put up taxes and she needed some cover. The tragedy of it is, Chris, that what we didn't then have was a proper debate about how we find more money for the NHS, which we are going to need, more money for defence, which we're definitely going to need.
Even more.
Yes, and avoid screwing businesses and families with ever higher taxes. Yeah. And that's where the welfare reform bit is so important.
And you were furious when it came out. You were furious in the House of Commons, that 22 billion. Did they not just cash up other liabilities such as infected blood and the post office scandal, and that made their 22 billion. I mean, the thing, when you're in government, you don't need to crystallise any debt, do you, until you need to pay it. So 9 billion is what you need now, but you could need more spending in the future.
I mean, ahead of every budget, there is a gap between the money coming in and the money going out. And the job of the Chief Secretary of the Treasury is to go around government departments and to find efficiencies. And we had the gap of about 9 billion, which we had plans to find efficiencies to resolve. Rachel Reeves made a big song and dance of this so-called black hole, but she's got exactly the same black hole right now ahead of her autumn budget. So this is just the normal business of being Chancellor. But the real tragedy is that all that political capital that was wasted on the winter fuel allowance and arguments, farmers, arguments over the black hole, if they'd used that to win the argument, the principled argument for welfare reform, that we cannot as a country afford to sign off 80,000 people every year and say, you don't have to work, you don't even have to look for work. This is not viable. And also what it means is it fuels demand for migration, because businesses say, all these people signed off on welfare, I need some foreigners, please, in order to fill my vacancies. Yes. And that is where they should have used their political capital to win that.
You were Chancellor last May. I mean, you're part of a party in power for 14 years. A lot of this is on you, isn't it? I mean, your government dropped the in-person interviews at the COVID, understandable, and haven't brought them back in again. So now you can read a script and get your benefits sorted out.
Well, we've got to bring back in-person interviews. Absolutely essential to do. There was a court ruling in 2021 that forced the government to move to everyone being able to do their assessments on the phone, and we would absolutely have changed that. But look, the big picture was that there were big reforms that we wanted to make, but then we had the pandemic, which was a once-in-a-lifetime shock. That caused the end of Boris Johnson's government. That meant that, lots of big reforms that could have made the most of Brexit took longer. And, of course, that's a great sadness that we didn't make more progress. But were we right to concentrate on COVID and to stop hundreds of thousands of businesses melting down, support families in a very, very difficult period? I think we were. But yes, there was an opportunity cost.
Just finally looking forward to this autumn then. Yeah, you think, yes, taxes go up this autumn? It's pretty much nailed on.
It's the most likely thing, but I still think if I was, going to be giving Rachel Reeves any kind of advice, I would say that in most people's eyes, the litmus test as to whether we have a strong, competent, capable government is whether they can get to grips with the welfare budget. People are as scared of soaring welfare costs as they are of small boat crossings. And this is something which, if she is going to prove her economic competence, she has to find a way of winning the argument with Labour backbenchers. And I would just say this. As you know, Chris, I was Health Secretary for nearly 6 years, longest serving Health Secretary. I did not find a single doctor who didn't say to me that if you have anxiety or depression, you need social contact. The worst thing you can do is exclude people from the world of work. And so what we should be doing, if people coming forward with mental illness, which is the biggest cause of the growth in the welfare budget, is we should be saying, we're going to treat you, not we're going to sign you off having to look for work.
This episode of Chopper's Political Podcast is brought to you by TallyMoney.
Hello, I'm Bev Turner. Now, it can feel like the money in our bank accounts at the moment does not keep up with the cost of living. And maybe there's a solution. I'm here today with the CEO of TallyMoney, Cameron Parry. Cameron, what is TallyMoney?
Well, Bev, with TallyMoney, you get a current account and a debit card, but instead of pounds, you use milligrams of gold as your everyday money.
So why gold?
Gold traditionally is a great store of value. It has, on average, gone up at over 11% per annum for the last 25 years against the pound. It's tripled in value in the last decade. And in the last 2 years alone, it's increased by 50% against the pound. Banks' savings products just can't compete with that level of growth.
But this isn't just about gold. This is about a currency that you guys have created at TallyMoney? Explain it to me as though I'm an idiot.
So, look, people need to be able to hold their earnings and build their savings in a money that retains its value and remains in their legal control and remains theirs to access, away from government control.
Great. You had me at not exposed to government control.
You should feel safe and happy with your money. You should have peace of mind the more money you see in your bank balance, and that's the type of thing we're trying to deliver and give people choice in the type of money they get to use every day.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thank you.
Just about Rachel Reeves. Do you know why she cried yet? Have you found out?
I do.
Were you there? Were you there watching her sob?
I was there, and it was one of those moments that you never forget as an MP. It was a horrible moment. I think it was quite a humanising moment, because I remember thinking as I went into PMQs, I mean, you've seen it for years and years and years. It's a bear pit, isn't it? It's horrible. And I remember thinking, this is the cruelty of British politics, that the government's just lost this major welfare reform bill, and the next morning, Keir Starmer has to face the leader of the opposition, and that would never happen to President Trump or President Macron. And I remember thinking, this is brutal British politics, but I'm kind of looking forward to it, because this is what happens in Parliament, and then this happened, and suddenly you realise we are all human, including our political opponents, people that we have profound disagreements with. And I have to say, my heart did go out to Rachel then.
Do you send her a note?
I sent her a private message, yes.
And she replied?
It was a private message, so I'll leave it
A sad emoji, happy emoji.
I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, it's a challenge, I think, but we weren't told why she was crying. We'd have the press would have backed off. If it was a family issue, if there's a reason in the background, we don't know what it is. We're okay. The press, we do respond to human issues, but we weren't told that by anybody. So that's why the story kept going.
I'm sure that's right, but I also think that in the end, I'm sure you have to respect that this is a very, very tough job.
A lot of our viewers and listeners are worried about pensions. Do you think there'll be that might change in the budget going forward, increasing on forcing bosses to pay more into their pension pots, or some form of taxation change that?
Okay, I'm going to be a really boring chancellor now.
Yes,
I'm not. I'm going to comment.
Oh,
but I'm going to give you the economic reason why it'd be a disaster to tax pensions. Look, it would really annoy pensioners. It would really annoy people building up their pension pots. But if you say, why is it that America's growing faster, China's growing faster, Korea's growing faster than us? It is because they have economies where they invest more, they save more, and therefore they grow more. And what we do in this country is we consume a lot. We're a consumption-led economy. Now, if you start taxing pensions, people are going to save less. And it's exactly the wrong direction to go. So again, if you really want economic growth, you should be encouraging people to save more, not discouraging it.
Well, the critics say that the triple lock was a kind of a bribe to the elderly vote that your government did. And would you fight the next election on that policy?
Well, that's going to be a matter for the leader of the party. It's not above my pay grade. And I think that's something we'll decide near the time. What I would say is this, that one of the reasons the triple lock is so important to so many people is because we're not getting as good return from our private pension pots as we could be. I'll give you an example. If we got the same returns from our pension pots as Australians get from theirs, over 40 years of savings, an Australian pension pot is about double the size of ours. So
and that's because they invest in different assets?
Because our pension funds put all their money into bonds, which get some of the lowest returns, whereas Australian pension funds are scouring the world for better returns from high growth companies. So I think the first step before you start talking about all difficult things like the triple lock, is to try and get a pension system so that people's private pensions are getting better returns.
Yeah. Wait and see. The issue of Nigel Farage sort of erupted as a leader after you had said you were stepping down as Chancellor. How would you fight him?
I think it's quite straightforward. First of all, don't be spooked by the fact that Reform have done very well in the polls in the last year. I mean, it was completely predictable. We've been in power for 14 years. We had our worst ever defeat. the country's not going to suddenly come back and say all is forgiven. There needs to be a period of silence. But in the end, we will become competitive again because we are the only party that is offering solutions. And welfare is a very good example. Nigel Farage wants to increase the welfare bill. He wants unfunded tax cuts of around £80 billion. I mean, I became
That's by lifting the threshold of £20,000.
Yes, I became Chancellor because Kwasi Kwarteng's mini-budget unravelled. He had unfunded tax cuts of half that level. Nigel Farage wants to have, it's double or quits.
There's just steroids.
It's as if none of that market collapse ever happened, and that's what he's promising. So I think as we get closer to an election, people will realise that the Conservatives, Kemi Badenoch, are offering real solutions. And I think there is a football pitch-sized gap in the market for a party offering real solutions, and I think it will be the Conservatives.
And she'll fight the election as your leader, will she?
I think she will, and I hope she does.
Your book is called Can We Be Great Again? Why a Dangerous World Needs Britain. The question has this kind of, you're an optimist, that's how you are, and then you for 20 years now. But your book suggests that we may not be great again.
Well,
why not say we can be great again?
We can be great again. And actually, that is the conclusion of the book. We absolutely can be great again. I put it as a question mark because in the end, it's about the choices we make as a country. And I talk about what those choices are. But let me give you just one example. I wrote that book because when I was Foreign Secretary, I went around saying we're a great country. And I was thinking in the back of my mind, could I prove this? And so I looked at all the big challenges the world faces, what Putin is doing in Ukraine, what China is threatening when it comes to the future of democracy.
And Taiwan.
And, and I concluded we absolutely are a great country. We can be a great country. But the thing that worries people is the state of the British economy. So we are now the 6th largest economy in the world. What do the independent experts say that we will be in 15 years' time, 2039? All these stories of decline and how terrible the economy is and how badly it's all going. In 15 years' time, we will still be the 6th largest economy in the world. In fact, we'd have closed the gap with Japan and Germany, remain slightly ahead of us, but we'll have closed that gap. And it's France that falls out of the top 10 as it happens. So I think there's all to play for. And I do think the doom and gloom about Britain, I wouldn't want to minimise how tough life has been for ordinary families. But I think sometimes we have forgotten it's been very tough elsewhere as well. Everywhere's got their problems. Take the 2 most powerful countries in the world, America and China. Massive problems in both countries, as we're seeing with all the upheavals that Trump is causing. We're seeing with the Chinese economy in a terrible shape. So, we mustn't lose our mojo.
We're defeatist, are we?
We've become too defeatist. Maybe it's not surprising after the pandemic, but, let me say this, Chris. The British press, one of the most vibrant, robust in the world, but we are the global experts at washing our dirty linen in public. And sometimes that gives everyone the impression that everything is going to rack and ruin in this country. Never you.
Don't blame us.
Never you. But no, you're an honourable exception. Never a negative word came from your lips, Chris. I know that.
We report what you guys say. The Tories are kicking 7 bells out anything the government says. I mean, the politicians do it. We report it, don't we?
I wouldn't want to change our press for 1 second because I think it's got some tremendous strengths. But I would just say this, that, your job is to hold politicians to account and to tell people what's going wrong. And sometimes that can give people the impression that things are a whole lot worse here than elsewhere, when that often isn't the case.
There's a feeling of crumbling institutions, insecure borders, unsafe streets. I mean, that's what we feel it is.
Yeah.
And that's what Semi Badenoch talks about. Your leader says.
Absolutely. And do you know what? Small boat crossings, it's an absolute indictment on the British political class that we have not solved it, but it is a totally solvable problem. And, we need to either rewrite international law or get out of these conventions. I'm not
even out of the ECHR.
If we cannot reform it, I'm absolutely in favour of leaving it.
That's what David Cameron said. Everyone says that. I mean,
no, I don't think that's quite fair. I think the truth is that we need to put a very clear proposal on the table. By the way, the person to do this is Keir Starmer. He is a human rights lawyer. He knows this law backwards. we need to put a very clear proposal on the table that says this change is necessary for us to control our borders. And if the other signatories of the ECHR say no, that's fine, we'll leave. It's as simple as that. But it's not just that. It's also making sure that people are detained when they arrive here illegally. It's having a deterrence policy, that, as we would have had with Rwanda if that hadn't been cancelled. Anyway, the point I'm saying is it's a solvable problem. We need to get on and solve it.
So we should be prouder to be Brits in this world. We're forged for good.
I think we've got a lot going for us. And I think if you said, which are the countries that have created an international order since the Second World War that, for all its faults, has led to more freedom, more prosperity, less disease than any other period in human history, I think you would say the United States and the United Kingdom are the two countries that have done that more than anyone else. Both have lost their way, and we need both of them to get their motive.
So why don't we talk about this country being, colonialism being a bad thing, our imperial past, slavery. We will say on GB News, we actually ended slavery. We 2,200, I think, sailors lost their lives ending slavery. I mean, but we don't want to talk about that, do we? We talk about the negativity of this country.
I think that is, so dangerous because, we didn't do everything perfectly right in our history, for sure. But in the end, there is no bigger defender of freedom, democracy, open societies than the United Kingdom. And if we have this self-doubt that grows into self-loathing, who is going to stick up for the kind of values that mean that your kids and my kids can grow up in a free society with prosperous market economies and all the amazing opportunities that we've been lucky enough to have?
It's silly, I think. You mentioned Donald Trump. He's made the world more unpredictable in your book. We should still try to, we get close to him. I mean, despite Donald Trump, some would say he's actually doing his best by his own country, not necessarily a negative issue for him.
Well, he's someone who, obviously, there are going to be lots of things where I would disagree with what he said. I disagree with some of the earlier comments he made about Ukraine. I disagree with his views on trade and tariffs.
He's come round on Ukraine, hasn't he?
Yes, he has. And hopefully what he said on tariffs, his bark will be worse than his bite. But in his favour, I would say that, firstly, this is someone who does want to change things. And he wants to get rid of the defeatism and declinism that says it doesn't matter who we elect, nothing's going to change. And secondly, he does believe in a strong America. So I think those two things are positives.
Yeah, and I think if you listen to what he says, I think he wants to end the killing in Ukraine. I think he sees both sides of the ledger. We don't see the deaths in Ukraine here, not talked about. We see the Russian ones. He sees this meat grinder. I think he wants to try and end it, but he thinks he can do a deal with Putin. That's being found out now. But I think he comes from that position. I don't think he's a cruel man. I think he wants to end suffering.
I think he sincerely wants to end the war. But I think he has come to realise that if you end up giving Putin a win after a war that he started, actually that will lead to more war, more death and more suffering over the longer term.
He's not addressing Parliament, we hear this week. Should he address Parliament?
Well, look, this is, I think, a bit of clever stage management by the government to arrange his visit at a time when Parliament is not.
But what a shame is that they can't trust MPs not to kick off if he comes to talk to.
Yes, but what you're doing in diplomacy is trying to build strong relations rather than create a PR disaster. And so I think Keir Starmer's actually handled the relationship pretty well.
You're at a pause in your political career, aren't you? Now you weren't meant to be Chancellor. You became Chancellor after that phone call on the Eurostar from Liz Truss. Do you look back on the first part of your time as in government? It may come back again. Let's see on that. But I remember, what was any regrets? I remember when you were shaking the bell at the Olympics and the bell fell off.
Yes, I will never ever forget. Can you imagine? Can you imagine if there was a group of brownies on the deck of HMS Belfast, and I was asked to ring this bell, and I rang it a bit too vigorously, and the bell kind of decomposed, and the end of the bell went flying into this group of small girls. If one of them had had to go to A&E on the day of the Olympic opening ceremony because the guy in charge of the Olympics had
Wounded her.
wounded her, or worse. It would have been a.
Did we get to the bottom of it? Someone.
Well, there's a good question. I'm not so much of a conspiracy theorist as to think that someone did that on purpose. But anyway, look, there are lots of moments, very hairy moments that I had, but I actually don't regret a second. It's an incredible privilege to do those jobs, and that's why I decided to stand again for Parliament, and I'll stand as long as the.
You fought really hard for that seat.
I
Let me
did.
tell you, I remember vividly. And then next time round is at the end. I mean, there's so many of high caliber politicians like yourself on the backbench of the Tory party, James Cleverly, Tom Tugendhat, yourself, and others. I wonder when Avengers will reassemble. When you're going to have one of those.
Look, I don't rule out in a future Conservative government, if I was invited back into the cabinet, a bit like Ken Clarke was under David Cameron, if the leader at that time, the Prime Minister, wants me back, I absolutely would not rule it out, because it is a privilege. Public service is a privilege.
It is.
But that seems a long way off right now.
And just finally, do you think the Tories it was okay to lose last election? Given the challenge Labour was facing now, it was said to me before the election by some Conservatives, this is one not to win.
No, I don't think that actually. Look, I think
despite the problems.
Our role in British politics is to be the party that takes tough and difficult and often unpopular decisions that are right for the long-term future of the country. And boy, we could have done with that in the last few weeks.
Well, look, Sir Jeremy Hunt, thank you for joining us today on Chopper's Political Podcast. Your book, Can We Be Great Again? Why a Dangerous World Needs Britain is in its third reprint now.
Yes, and,
so
it's doing well. It's doing well. So, available on Amazon, Waterstones and
elsewhere.
All good bookshops.
Sounds like great holiday reading. Thank you for joining us, Sir Jeremy Hunt. I'm joined now by Labour MP for South Pembrokeshire, Henry Tufnell. Henry, welcome back to Chopper's Political Podcast. You're worried, aren't you, about these net zero levies?
Yeah, so 20% of the UK's energy comes through the Port of Milford Haven, which sits in my constituency. So I have an oil refinery, a gas-fired power station and 2 LNG. So it's a big part of my constituency. And British manufacturing in general in these industries are being hammered by high energy costs, but also a high carbon price.
Just in layman's terms, that means that they pay more per unit of energy?
Yes, so for
because
CO2.
of the need to support windmills and green energy, is that right?
So the levies is the price on carbon. So that price effectively is going up as a result of various measures taken by government. And I've released a report that sets out, as part of the Commission for Carbon Competitiveness, the importance of trying to get this carbon price right so that British manufacturing can operate and British industry can operate on a level playing field. Because the problem that we have that we've had in Pembrokeshire is we had 4 oil refineries in our sort of heyday in the 60s and 70s, and that's now come to 1. We had 1 oil refinery. You pack up and move to Pakistan because it's easier in terms of that regulatory framework. It's more competitive. And all that happens in that situation is my community in Pembrokeshire lose all the jobs. And you outsource the carbon to Pakistan because the same emissions are being put up into the atmosphere.
It's not on our carbon footprint, which makes everyone feel better, but actually it's worse off because it's in Pakistan, less regulation possibly.
Exactly. And the people that are impacted are my constituents who lose their jobs. And we already have 30% child poverty in Pembrokeshire.
Yeah.
So it's a real big issue.
Chemical plants closing.
Yes.
That's a worry.
Yes, 1 chemical plant every month since December's closing. We've had 2 oil refineries, got Grangemouth and Lindsay. So there's only 6. There was only 6, so 2 out of 6 have closed. Yeah. So it's a real big issue, particularly for my constituents.
You're not alone in thinking this. You and colleagues.
Yes.
How many colleagues?
Well, Men Leon co-authored this report. She sits on the commission with me. So
on your podcast very recently, Men Leon.
Yeah, so she's fantastic colleague, and she's been really supportive, and we've been working together on this issue.
So you support the green transition.
Yeah.
The destination, which isn't carbon neutral by 2050.
Yes.
Net zero by 2050.
Yes.
But you think we're going too quickly? At the expense of British industry.
So I just think we need to be really careful about how this. So the Climate Change Act has a basis of territorial emissions. So if the UK could hit our emissions target by 2050 by completely deindustrialising deindustrializing and moving these factories offshore, and we'd hit our emissions, but then lots of my constituents and Mel's constituents and other people's other people across the country would lose their livelihood.
And out of sight, out of mind is not a fair approach in terms of a global position, is it?
No, exactly. It's not, and we need to maintain that competitiveness, because we want as a country to be able to compete with the USA, compete with China on manufacturing. If you're going to address regional inequality in this country, you have to look at these industries, because often they're not in that sit outside cities, sit in areas like coastal communities like mine that are historically have high levels of, as I've already said, about child poverty and deprivation.
And sovereign power here, sovereign
exactly. That's
manufacturing, all those issues we saw in recent years, concerned about the issue of tariffs.
Yes. So, yes, exactly. I mean, energy security is really important. So we want to have that. And if we're going to increase our defence budget and try and land the supply chain in the UK, we've got to have this manufacturing capability. And so that's really important in terms of maintaining that global competitiveness for UK industry.
And don't get wedded to the European Union post-Brexit, because they've got their own issues with higher energy costs.
Yeah, so that's we've been, as a commission, we have been concerned about this dynamic alignment and making sure that we get that right, because from looking at it, they have a higher level in respect to that carbon price, and if we align immediately, we're going to drive up that price even more.
You mentioned this commission. What is the commission again, briefly?
So it's a cross-party group that works alongside industry in order to maintain this competitiveness in terms of the manufacturing.
Tory MPs, Labour MPs on it?
So we had
Reform UK on it.
No, we don't have a Reform UK policy. We had.
I'm surprised, because it's kind of very reformy, some of this stuff.
Well, I don't think that advocating for British industry is particularly. I mean, we had Nick Timothy on it before he left to go up into. I think he took on a role in the shadow with the Conservatives. So look, there is cross-party support for this issue. I think it's important that we maintain that. Yeah. I don't. It's not to care about British manufacturing. No, it's not to Labour MPs. We are the party of work. We come from the trade union movement. This is something that we care about deeply. It's deeply rooted within our values.
100%. But critics say that Ed Miliband, the climate change secretary, he doesn't have the same understanding or the willingness to be flexible to support industry. That's the difference, isn't it?
Well, I think
what do you think about your commission and your report and what you're saying?
That's why it's important that we're writing to DESNZ, writing to other members in government to.
That's his department.
That's his department. Sorry, Department for Environment Security and Net Zero. Just maintaining those conversations. I met with Michael Shanks earlier today. So we have to have these conversations. There has to be that consensus, because we all want to hit these targets, but we don't want to do it at the expense of communities like mine in Pembrokeshire.
We're speaking a week, don't we, when the Met Office issued a stark warning, emphasising the government's commitment to tackling climate change. In the words of Ed Miliband, the way he says, our British way of life is under threat of global warming.
Yeah, well, quite clearly, like the science. Yeah, the science is stark. I mean, you can't dispute that. But we have to make sure that we do it in a. It's got to be the words that we have to get across is a just transition. Has to be a just transition, because ultimately, if it's not, you will lose the argument on what's been on net zero.
It sounds very, very credible.
Yeah,
it's a just transition is something we haven't heard yet from Labour.
Yeah, we need to have a just transition that takes communities with us, because if we don't have a just transition and we throw people into poverty in my constituency, you will lose the argument on this issue.
A telling intervention. While I've got you, we're speaking on Wednesday afternoon this week. 4 MPs lost the whip. Why is this happening when you've got this huge majority? Tony Blair didn't suspend Jeremy Corbyn over the Iraq war. He just had a debate about it. It looks weak suspending, doesn't it?
Well, look, I'm not across the details on this. As I've just heard about it. I don't know the exact circumstances that have happened to take it to this place. Look, I'm real supportive of the government. We've got a great agenda that we're delivering on, and we will remain behind the government. I mean, obviously, it's sad to lose colleagues, but again, I'm not aware of the exact circumstances where this has happened.
It's not a great look, though, for a government with a big majority to start suspending people. It's not what Tony Blair did. That's what Graham Stringer's told GB News. Why is your PM doing it?
Well, look, as I said, I don't know the circumstances and the individual circumstances that happen because, in some instances, this has to take place. There has to be a discipline within any political party in order to try and get your legislation through and to govern effectively, right? So there has to be discipline in the party.
It comes after the rebellions on winter fuel benefits. We're told by sources that it's due to repeated breaches of party discipline.
Well, look, we as a party, we have to, party discipline is really important.
Voters hate split parties.
Well, exactly. We have to. It's very important that we remain united, and that's a central pillar of any government to have that unity.
You've rebelled a bit too, haven't you?
Well, look,
naughty MP.
Well, I think it's important that we
touch off the podcast.
I think it's important that we, as representatives of our area, we speak out on the issues that matter to them. And I don't see that as odds with the Prime Minister, because that's something that he said throughout the election campaign. And look, I'm committed to the government. I want the government to succeed. I have constant conversations with ministers on these issues. So I think it's all part and parcel of
I'm not well say you rebelled, but as far as
I didn't rebel, but I was one of those that signed the reasoned amendment.
Forgive me.
So I wasn't one of the 49, but I was one of the original 108 that signed the reasoned amendment.
So Henry Tufnell, it's been great to have you on the podcast. I think what you're doing here is fascinating, and I would say, has merit, because there's kind of been grown up about net zero, getting there, but at the same pace as communities, and preserving livelihoods is so important.
Yeah, it's so important that, because otherwise, as I said, we will lose the argument on this if we don't bring communities with us.
Great to have you here on the Chopper's Political Podcast. Have a great summer. I won't see you now until September.
Thank you.
What are your plans?
I'm going to go to Pembrokeshire. I mean, we've got the best beaches in the world. So 100%. White Sands, Saundersfoot was recently in the newspaper. So
St. David's.
Yeah, St. David's. So if you're looking for a last minute holiday, come to Pembrokeshire.
I'm coming to see you. I tweeted Christopher Bonnex. Well, what's your Twitter handle?
At Tufnell Henry.
Very good. At Tufnell Henry. Email us your email Henry or WhatsApp Henry, or even tweet him your holiday photographs. I'm joking. Email me chopper@gbnews.uk if you're interested in what Henry had to say. Thank you earlier of course, to Jeremy Hunt, the former Conservative Chancellor, and do email me any thoughts on what he had to say, or indeed Henry Tufnell. If you enjoyed this podcast, please do tell your friends. If you really enjoyed it, do a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. That helps other people to find it. Thanks to the great team of GB News colleagues behind the podcast, Mick Booker and Jeff Marsh, and the podcast Queen Bee, Rebecca Newns, and the worker bee, humble old George McMillan. But most importantly of all, thank you for listening. If you've got more Chopper in your life, and Henry Tufnell does, and who doesn't, catch me during the week on GB News for our latest political updates from our best reporting on Westminster, and keep up to date with our best reporting on our website too, gbnews.com. But until next time, from Henry Tufnell and me, enjoy the beach, have a great August. Cheerio!